This is Special Prosecutor Larry Klayman.
I'm the only lawyer ever to obtain a court ruling that a president of the United States committed a crime.
For truth. For competition.
As a young lawyer, I helped break up AT&T. That's why you have all your cell phones today.
For sovereignty. For the Republic.
I'm the guy who, at Judicial Watch, which I founded, uncovered the Chinagate scandal. Millions of dollars going to the Clinton campaign, corrupting our political system.
For the privacy of citizens.
And I'm the only guy to have enjoined the National Security Agency from mass surveillance on hundreds of millions of Americans.
Tearing it up.
I'm the son of meat packers in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I know how to slice and dice.
Bringing it back.
We're going to take this country apart and put it back together again in the way envisioned by our founding fathers.
It's not just talk.
We're not just regurgitating news stories. Larry Klayman, special prosecutor, is making the news.
And now, here's Larry.
Welcome to this week's edition of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. As I always say, we have another very important show. Appreciate today because tomorrow may be even worse. And I'm an optimist, I might say. I could be a member of the Optimist Club. And I continue to be an optimist, and that's why I do what I do ever since I founded Judicial Watch in 1994, to running for the U.S. Senate in 2003 and 2004 in Florida, and then founding Freedom Watch after that, as well as my own private legal practice and this radio show, and I'm a columnist, I'm an author, all kinds of things. I get up every morning with a generally positive attitude. But, you know, it's really becoming very difficult, and that's why I communicate with you on this radio show, and that's why I try to tell you the truth as I see it, because this is one of the few places that you'll get the truth. Unfortunately, it has become a scandal industry. It has become a reality show. You've heard me say that. Some people say, Larry, you're being too repetitive. Well, you know, advertising is repetition. And it takes advertising and it takes repetition to get the point across to the masses that our country is sinking down the tubes. Margaret Thatcher, that great prime minister from England many years ago, said that it's the American and the British legal system which creates our prosperity. People want to put money in our countries. They want to build businesses. They want to do creative things because they know that we have a legal system, at least they thought so, that would protect their investments. We have an investment, too, not just monetarily. We have an investment to the vision and creation of our founding fathers. The great country that was created in 1776 with the Declaration of Independence in my birthplace of Philadelphia, fought and won hard in a revolutionary war against the British Crown with the aid of the French and their armada. We stand for liberty and freedom. And we're losing that. And how are we losing that primarily? Not just the ethics and morality, which is sinking down the drain with our young people and even with our older people. The degradation. And you can see this with the candidates on the left. I mean, what lowlives they are. Frankly, it's unbelievable that the country has come to this. You never saw people running for public office like this before in our 240-some-year history of this great country. But it really goes back to the breakdown of our legal system. And I founded Judicial Watch in 1994 because, in fact, if I had not, I probably would have resigned as a lawyer. I would have rather, as I've said many times, flip hamburgers at McDonald's. I had seen how corrupt the system had become. I had seen judges who make the decisions in cases that have anything to do with the government or politics, not on the basis of the merits primarily, and there are some exceptions like Judge Royce Lamberth of the U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia, Stanley Sporkin retired from that court, Judge N. Sanders Sauls in Tallahassee, who decided the 2000 election in effect, Supreme Court after that. There are judges like that, but very few. And I also saw the corruption among my legal profession. I became the anti-lawyer. And now you're seeing it more and more with disciplinary councils, particularly in the District of Columbia, that try to eliminate lawyers from the practice of law because they don't like their politics. These people having donated heavily to Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, and Democrat candidates. It's become a you or me exist lifestyle and system here in the United States. And the legal system was meant to equalize what goes on between the parties, to protect all of us, the judges, the lawyers, and the law. It's the law. I remember watching the trailer to Wyatt Earp. I've mentioned this before as well, where Gene Hackman, who plays Wyatt Earp's father when he was very young, said to him, he says, you know, Wyatt, I want you to understand something about life. He says it's your family that counts the most. But after that, it's the law. And then he says to Wyatt, as Wyatt's thinking about going off to war and the Civil War, he says, you're going to meet some really bad people in life. And when you do, strike first and strike to kill. Well, I'm not advocating killing anybody, but what I am advocating doing, or hurting anybody in any way, everything that we do at Freedom Watch is peaceful and it's legal. But you see the breakdown in our legal system. You've seen it most recently in the last few weeks with this criminal James Comey, and I don't need to tell you all about him. You know, you hear it every night ad nauseum on Fox News and everywhere else. You hear the things that he's done, how he started the witch hunt against Trump, how he allowed for corruption at the FBI, how he cooked the Hillary Clinton email investigation, how he played a role in Fusion GPS, the Steele dossier, the whole 9 yards. Well, the current Attorney General, which we've been led to believe is the Messiah on Fox News, because he's a Trump Attorney General. Unfortunately, the president's not even in control of his own Department of Justice, has let Comey go. On 2 occasions when he could have indicted Comey, he took a dive. Then you have McCabe, Andrew McCabe, the deputy under Comey. Now they're floating the idea, well, maybe we'll indict McCabe. I've said this before. I can tell you with almost 100% certainty. This is the way it works in Washington. Indict the lower level hanging fruit, but leave the powers to be alone, because there by the grace of God go thee. And the Republicans know, who are now in control of the Justice Department, that if it turns over, they don't want the Democrats to do the same thing to them. It's mutual assured destruction. And this Attorney General, Bob Barr, has allowed for an appeal. I'm just giving you one other example of the dismissal of the supersedious indictment against Cliven Bundy and his sons. Who would ever think that a Trump Attorney General would allow that injustice to go forward, where Cliven has to spend a lot of money and go to ClivenBundyDefenseFund.org to support his defense and other things that we're doing? Because there's nobody out there to help Cliven Bundy except himself and you, the American people. But here's the real problem. And I've been writing this column in WorldNet Daily over and over again. I've got a column now. Go to freedomwatchusa.org. I had it published in another website today. And I had it published on our website. Because I want to say things that are so strong that even WorldNet Daily can't digest them fully. And I love WorldNet Daily and the people that run it. They're one of the few people that ever allow me to say exactly what I think. But this one is very, very strong. So I'm sending it out on my own. And it's called Reagan and Popeye. Enough is enough and enough is too much. Stop drinking the Kool-Aid. And you've heard me say this over and over again, too, is that couch potatoes, and, I'm not trying to offend anybody. I used to watch Fox News, too. I can't watch CNN or MSNBC except to find out what the left is doing. But Fox News has become, frankly, a broken record. It deceives the American people. It puts on the same guests every single night, in particular Hannity. The same monologue every night. It's retooled. Justice is just around the corner. Major breaking developments. Something's going to happen now that we have Bill Barr as Attorney General. Well, we're not stupid. We know why Fox does that. Because they need to keep the viewers. They need to keep them and have them keep coming back. They need to get the advertising dollars. They've become richer and richer. And so, too, has my former public interest group. Because when I left in 2003 to run for the U.S. Senate, it was taken over by an individual who's not a lawyer, Tom Fitton. He changed the emphasis, the mission of Judicial Watch to transparency in government, getting documents. Well, that's fine. But as I said, when you get the documents, what are you going to do with the documents? Are you just going to go on Fox News and boast that I got more documents? That I've uncovered more corruption in government? We have enough corruption that you can have 100 million documents at this point. But what's happening with regard to justice? Now, Judicial Watch does this, and Fox is very powerful, and you're able to raise a lot of money. It's reported today in the Daily Beast, call it up, that Judicial Watch raised $72 million last year. Their net worth is now about $110 million. Now, would you think that a group that's worth $110 million and is raising money hand over fist could do something more than just mainly get documents? Now, we at Freedom Watch, and this is comparative advertising, that's what it is. We don't have that kind of resource. But we are bringing hard-hitting cases. We're bringing citizens' grand juries, and we need your support because we're actually trying to change the way things are happening. We're taking documents that we get and documents that others get and bringing hard-hitting lawsuits for Laura Loomer, for Chief Justice Roy Moore, for Sheriff Joe Arpaio, for our other clients, for ourselves. And I want you to go to freedomwatchusa.org and contribute to our cause. We don't have $110 million in net worth. And we need your help. We need to get bigger because Larry Klayman's a trial lawyer. Tom Fitton's not. He's not a lawyer at all. That's why he changed the mission. We need to have our own Justice Department because the one that's under the government, even under the Trump administration, is politicized, it's compromised, and to be honest, it's corrupt. So I want you to get up off the couch, to put the popcorn and the other snacks down. Put down the Diet Coke or the beer or whatever you're drinking. Turn Fox News off, okay, because it's not telling you the truth. It's feathering its own nest under the liberal Murdoch sons who now run it and own it. And join our Justice League at freedomwatchusa.org. Support that Justice League. We are your Gideon's army, and we need you to be part of that army to save this country before it goes finally down for the final count. I'm going to be right back to something that's actually more important than Robert Mueller. And this is an expert, Stephen GREER. You've been on before, as to whether or not there are extraterrestrials, whether we're being visited by aliens. This needs to be brought out. The American people need to know it, and it's been suppressed. And Stephen GREER is going to tell you the truth. I'll be right back.
Dangerous.
Don't care. Use the court and the law.
Lethal.
This is bad.
Special prosecutor.
Very bad.
Larry Klayman.
If you'd like to support Freedom Watch and this radio show, go to freedomwatchusa.org.
I'm back with Dr. Stephen GREER, a true American, someone who believes in telling the truth to the American people, an expert in unidentified flying objects and related issues. We've been on the show before. He's the author of Unacknowledged and also the film Unacknowledged, which you can find on Netflix, and I urge everybody to watch it. He's extremely accomplished. I introduce you to Dr. Stephen GREER. Stephen, tell the listeners about your background, why you're out there, why you're doing what you do, and what you're hoping to accomplish, and informing the American people of the truth about UFOs and visitations by aliens of this earth.
Sure. I'm an emergency trauma medical doctor, MD, and my uncle worked on the lunar module, put the first man on the moon. Most people know what that machine looks like. It's in the Smithsonian now. It's 50 years ago. And I've always had an interest in this area because I learned that, in fact, we were being visited, and it was highly classified back when I was 8 or 9 years old. So a very young guy in a family that was connected to aerospace projects. My uncle was an aerospace engineer. So I started a project in the 90s, known as the Disclosure Project, where we began to identify people who were inside these projects, both corporate and governmental. And I discovered shortly before I briefed President Clinton's CIA director, R. James Woolsey, that in fact these projects were being run illegally, that senior people in government who were in supposedly legally, constitutionally, whether it's left or right, it doesn't matter, it's the rule of law, would have supervision of such projects, even if they're highly classified or so-called black projects, in fact did not, and that they were being lied to about this. And this sort of turned my world upside down because My mom's family were some of the very first prisoner of war with the British in the founding of this country. My dad was hand-to-hand combat with the Japanese in World War II in the islands on an amphibious unit landing on those islands. And I was just outraged that, in fact, we have a country that had gone so far off the rails of democracy and openness and transparency that even super secret projects dealing with something this sensitive would be denied access to the president and the CIA director. And then I later found out, about 4 or 5 years later, I was briefing the head of intelligence for the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the head of Defense Intelligence Agency, that these very senior military guys, I mean, General Patrick Hughes, a 3-star general, had made inquiries into this subject, knew there were projects going on, and was denied access. Same thing with Admiral Tom Wilson, who was head of intelligence joint staff. He put together the intelligence briefings for the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Now, these are very serious issues. I mean, anyone who has a little bit of knowledge of governance must, at this point, in what I've just said, be deeply alarmed. So what I began to do was identify people on the inside who were courageous enough to come forward and expose the projects that were being run illegally. This is very different from people who are whistleblowers who expose things that they mistakenly think are just not being run right. But this is what that are absolutely provable in a court of law being run illegally outside the Constitution. Therefore, they're unconstitutional projects. And these are known as unacknowledged special access projects. And to give you an idea how crazy it is, I mean, most people remember the name of Gordon Cooper, one of the very first Mercury astronauts before the Apollo project. And he was a colonel. He was out in Edwards Air Force Base back in 1956. And one of these ET craft landed in broad daylight out on the range, out in the desert, in the Edwards complex. And his team went out and actually filmed it. They brought the film back to him. He processed it, looked at it, sent it to the Pentagon on a private, on one of the general's planes, because that's what he was ordered to do. And he said that case vanished into this black hole. This was 1956. Okay, fast forward 40 years, and
Stephen, we have about 15 seconds in this segment, then we're going to pick it up on the other end of the break. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, but basically, the Secretary of Defense in the 90s tried to get this case, and he was denied access, and was told it just had vanished. So that's the kind of problem we have. It's a very big constitutional law crisis.
We'll be right back with Stephen GREER.
And now, 4 words that make corrupt politicians make wee-wee in their little pants.
Transparency and the rule of law will be the touchstones of this presidency.
But we have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it.
Special Prosecutor Larry Klayman.
Be the one who makes our country great again. Go to freedomwatchusa.org and donate.
I'm back with Dr. Stephen GREER. Continue that, Stephen, because you see, our listeners know the score. They know the government doesn't tell us the truth. They know things are hidden. And this is a very important issue, and you're at the forefront of uncovering it and disclosing it for the American people. So continue. It's fascinating.
Yeah, I gave up my medical career and over $12 million personally in earnings to do this, just to give people an idea of the gravity that I saw in this crisis, which is an unacknowledged crisis. The media is totally not going to tell you the truth about this. And I don't mean just the left media, the right media. None of them will dig into this, because at the core of it is sitting trillions of dollars in assets that have to do with fossil fuels, that the technologies behind these so-called UFOs would be able to give us a replacement. It's like the book, Atlas Shrugged, Ayn Rand. This is a libertarian, fantasy, because these technologies would liberate the world from all kinds of centralized economic controls that would be a tide that would lift all ships of all people on this planet. But the big stakeholders, the corrupt oligarchs that are hand in glove with big corrupt government and covert programs, are working together to be sure that knowledge doesn't come out. And that's what we're up against. In fact, this meeting I had, the reason I was with Gordon Cooper, and when he told me this story about providing this case evidence from Edwards Air Force Base, where an ET craft landed, to the Secretary of Defense Cohen at the time, he and I were both addressing a group known as the Federalist Society. We were invited to come way back in the 90s to talk to them about this issue, and it was here in Washington. And the astronaut Gordon Cooper, pulled me aside and he said, "Have you ever heard of something like this?" I said, "Well, yes, sir, because I've already been briefing the CIA director and people at a level equal to the Secretary of Defense who when they make an inquiry into this, are basically told to go jump in the lake." And he said, "Well, this is outrageous. This is illegal." I said, "Of course it is. This is going to be the central thing I'm going to say to the people at the Federalist Society." So I think that what people don't understand is, there's no absence of evidence on this. If they go to Netflix and see Unacknowledged, it's a 2-hour documentary that has just one case after another. You're beginning to see the Pentagon leak out certain cases where fighter jets have chased these objects. What isn't being told in the media is that the management of this subject is being run criminally, unconstitutionally, because it benefits corrupt interests. And this is really the biggest racketeering influence corrupt organization, RICO, case in the history of the United States, bar none.
Tell us about the specific sightings that have been seen. I urge everyone to get your book Unacknowledged and to watch the Netflix movie. 2 hours. It's fascinating. Lots of whistleblowers, people talking right out of the horse's mouth. Other countries have acknowledged UFOs. Other world leaders have admitted it, but American presidents have not. And they're not, according to what you've told me in the past, Stephen, they don't even have access to this stuff. That's how secret it is. But what specifically can we point to where there have been craft that have been here, on our Earth, reverse engineering by our own people, such that we have the technology ourselves now to a large extent, and what's been going on in the future, and also tell people about the events that you put on periodically, where people are able to come and actually see these UFOs on their own.
Well, yeah, we're actually getting ready to do one of those in Joshua Tree National Park in last week of October, early November. And what I tell people is, don't take my word for any of this. I have 110 military men and some women and corporate people who are on the record, name, rank, serial number, with their DD-214 discharge forms from the military proving who they are, who are on the record on this. And that can be found at our website, SeriousDisclosure.com. There are links to that, and also on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/ Dr. Stephen Greer 55, and the year I was born. So I think what you find is that if you go through that testimony, and there's just on our YouTube channel, there are 70 of these top secret military witnesses. One of them is an Air Force intelligence officer, Doty, who knew CIA Director Richard Helms, but back in the 80s, up until about 1990, was with the Air Force Office of Special Investigations. He specifically oversaw a lot of these cases at a Kirkland Air Force Base and so-called Nellis Range, what some people call mistakenly Area 51, but knew specifically that we had craft that we were studying, and in fact had reverse engineered them, studied them, how they operate, and even tried to test fly some of the ET craft, one of which unfortunately went out of control and injured a bunch of people outside of Houston back in the 80s. And of course, the government denied that this had happened. And it ended up, they had put in a man-made nuclear-powered energy source because they couldn't figure out how to get the extraterrestrial one to work. it had a filter breach problem and was spewing radioactive waste on the people below. This is known as the Cash Landrum case. This man, Doty, was the principal investigator for the government on this unacknowledged super secret accident. But the people who ended up being hospitalized and subsequently died from radiation poisoning were never given their day in court. The government denied any such project existed. This is a real case, and now we have a top secret whistleblower who actually was the principal investigator and debriefed the 4 human pilots on this extraterrestrial vehicle that was being test flown out of Nellis going into Texas, and it ended up having to be escorted in by helicopters, and it did kind of crash land at a Air Force Base in Texas, but in the meanwhile, it injured through this radioactive leak a whole lot of people, similar to what just happened in Russia, where they had a nuclear-powered propulsion system on a missile that blew up and then killed those people and injured them. It was a very similar sort of case, except in this case, it was completely denied as having happened. The people were never compensated, and to this day, it has never been brought to justice.
Stephen, tell us how long these extraterrestrials, and based on your experience, knowledge, and all the interviews that you've conducted, have been here on Earth, and why they have not been hostile towards us.
Well, they've been around certainly for thousands of years. I think the evidence, if you go back and look at, there are cave drawings that have been carbon dated to 5,000 years ago in France and also in India that show what looked like a modern disc-shaped ET craft with creatures outside of it. If you look at the Nazca lines, these structures that are etched into the ground in Peru, that when you go up in the air, it actually is a set of symbols that apparently those people way back then knew we were being visited. I personally think there's intelligent life throughout the cosmos. And as when I was at the Vatican, I had a guy say, look, it'd be a terrible waste of space if God left all of his hopes only on this one planet with humans for intelligent life. But I think that it goes back a great long time. However, the key thing is, once we started detonating atomic weapons, there apparently been the 40s, 50s, 60s was this huge increase in interest by these civilizations because they were concerned that we were beginning to go into space. We had these weapons that could destroy an entire world, and that we had not evolved to be a civilized, what's called a level 1 civilization that's living together peacefully. So at that point, every single one of our nuclear facilities, atomic bomb squadrons, intercontinental ballistic missile sites, etc., were overflown by ET craft. And if you look at the book, Unacknowledged, and also a previous one called Disclosure, that is about the Disclosure Project, that has even more top secret testimony in it, you will see that we have, a large number of people who were at these facilities. In fact, there's a Colonel Diedrichson who supervised all nuclear facilities for the Department of Energy back then. It was the Atomic Energy Commission, and said point blank that every single one of our nuclear facilities were surveyed by these civilizations because they were hostile towards us. They were very concerned about our hostility. So I always tell people, we're so narcissistic. And self-absorbed, we don't realize that if you were to go out into space and look what's going on this planet, there would be great concern from a civilization that is, in my opinion, these civilizations are socially and spiritually way far more developed than we are. Otherwise, they would have blown themselves up before they got out of their star system. So I think we have a situation where this whole subject has been mismanaged by people who had agendas not in the interest of the people, but in the interest of corrupt interest, big money, big oil, big government, all colluding together to keep the truth of this away from us, and also to give us the liberating technologies that would allow every home and business to be disconnected from the grid and run without any need for expensive energy sources. These are called zero-point energy systems, and those were studied based on both human breakthroughs, but also the study of these extraterrestrial devices for the last 70 years you and me as taxpayers have spent trillions of dollars studying these technologies, but we haven't gotten a dividend from that investment yet. It's all still kept very secret, which is a huge problem because, as you know, even if you don't believe we have any environmental problems from pollution, in which case you're, no offense, a moron, forget global warming. There are 5 million people who die from inhaling particulate matter from filthy sources of energy. So the truth is that we can do better, but we don't need government regulation and a bunch of tax and spend stuff to do it. We need to liberate the science and the technology, and that's where the solutions are. And guess what? We as citizens have already paid for that solution, but we're being denied access to it by interests that are very, very corrupt.
You know, the issue of surveilling what we're doing at nuclear sites is interesting. I told this story, I think, before when you were on, Stephen, is that one day I was coming out of the prison in Pahrump, Nevada. That's Area 51, where we exploded atomic weapons after World War II. There's still nuclear waste there. My client, Cliven Bundy, was in that prison with his sons and others. And I'm walking out with a guard, and I say to him, boy, this place is the modern-day Alcatraz. We don't have San Francisco Bay, but you got rattlesnakes. And he says to me, Mr. Klayman, he says, I'm not worried about the rattlesnakes, but I see UFOs every night. I mean, and here you are, Area 51, and that is a nuclear site. So that kind of confirms what you've been saying in terms of them observing what we're doing because they're concerned.
Well, many of those, some of them are ET. A lot of those are actually man-made. So Lockheed Skunk Works, Lockheed Martin Corporation has a division known as the Skunk Works. Northrop Grumman has a division that also deals with this technology, as does Booz Allen Hamilton and SAIC and Boeing, BAE Systems. And some of the things that people are seeing are extraterrestrial. A number of them are, in fact, man-made anti-grav, let's call them, systems that aren't using jets and rockets, but using very advanced electronics and electromagnetic theory and the so-called zero-point energy source to zip around. And so you have two things going on that people confuse because they don't know there are two things. They think everything that's unusual zipping in the sky has to be interstellar. It isn't. There are a number of these things that are seen. Now, these secret projects would happy for people to think everything is alien when it's not, because they don't want to admit they have these technologies. Because think of the scandal, all the people who died in rocket accidents in the space shuttle and Apollo era, totally unnecessary. The fact that we're still using jets going 500, 600 miles an hour when we have technologies that would completely replace the propulsion system.
That's an excellent point, Stephen, and we're running out of time, but I'm going to bring you back. Hope to see you soon because you are an expert and you're telling the truth, and the American people need to hear it. Thank you for what you do, my good friend. I'll be right back with The Verdict, the special prosecutor with Larry Klayman.
Before he was a trial lawyer, he sliced him and diced him.
People used to ask me, Larry, what caused you to start Judicial Watch and now Freedom Watch, given the powerful forces in this country that put you at risk?
In a meat packing plant.
I'm the son of meat packers in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I know how to slice and dice.
A very special prosecutor, Larry Klayman.
If you'd like to support Freedom Watch and this radio show, go to freedomwatchusa.org.
Now the verdict. The verdict is that we have a total breakdown in our legal system. We have a breakdown in the American people being told the truth, whether it's about Robert Mueller, whether it's about James Comey, whether it's about Andrew McCabe, whether it's about anything in terms of justice. The government is being propped up currently by dishonest media organizations that spew forth predictions that are not going to happen to be able to boost their ratings, to be able to boost their advertising dollars. We have public interest groups like my former public interest group that's worth $110 million but spends their time getting documents when they could be using the money to bring hard-hitting cases and joining us with citizens' grand juries and actually doing something productive. But no, they don't want competition. They just want to rake in the dollars. Now we have a situation where we're not even being told the truth about visitation from other solar systems and other planets, perhaps. And this is particularly important. The American people need to know this, and it's being suppressed, and it's super important, and it will ultimately determine our future as much as the breakdown of our legal system. And that's why I'm grateful to people like Dr. Stephen GREER who are willing to tell the truth, because when people like that come forward to tell the truth, frequently they're ridiculed, they're made fun of. But we now know that even our own Air Force pilots confirm that there are these alien craft in the United States and throughout the world. Other countries have admitted it. Russia's admitted it. I filed a Freedom of Information Act request 8 years ago. And I finally get a response a few months ago which says, gee, sorry, it took us 8 years. Here are the documents. They're only about 3 inches thick, and they were nearly all in Russian. I mean, you know the government has more, so I filed a lawsuit to get the documents. See, we get documents too. But the difference is that when Freedom Watch gets the documents, we're going to do something with the documents. We're not going to stick them where the sun don't shine. We're going to bring hard-hitting cases. We're going to seek indictments. We're going to seek trials for misusing taxpayer money and then lying to the American people. And we're doing the same thing with the James Comeys, the Rod Rosensteins, who this week more information was uncovered with what we already knew, that he had tried to wage a coup against the President of the United States. Ilham Omar was served just yesterday with a complaint. Excuse me, it was Rashida Tlaib. I get the two Muslim congressmen confused sometimes because they're so similar. They're so hateful. They're so anti-Semitic. They're so anti-Christian. They're so anti-Israel. But our brave client, Laura Loomer, filed a complaint against Rashida Tlaib for being assaulted. She was served yesterday in her congressional office. You see, we're moving forward. Freedom Watch is your Justice Department, not the so-called Justice Department of the Trump administration. And regrettably, the president isn't even in control of his own department. We know that because if he had been, he wouldn't have had to go through this entire witch hunt of Robert Mueller for going on 3 years. He wouldn't have to be going through the impending impeachment in front of Congress with Gerald Nadler. These people would be indicted and locked up. These people are also misusing taxpayer money and misusing the offices of Congress. So this is the thing that Freedom Watch does that you need to support. This is not just an advertisement. We need your support. We need to get bigger. We don't have $110 million in the bank. We have enough to get by. And that's why please join us and join our Justice League by going to freedomwatchusa.org. Support Cliven Bundy in his defense in a case being brought by, if you can believe this, Attorney General William Barr. He's not in control of the people in Las Vegas who are pursuing this frivolous appeal. And if we don't win that appeal, Cliven could be retried and be sentenced to life imprisonment if we lose. Support Corsi, Jerry Corsi, who stuck his neck out. And we got an indictment against Robert Mueller. He's going to be tried. I can assure you he'll be convicted. Sentences will be meted out. And I said Rosenstein's next, and so is Tlaib and Omar and those kinds of people. We need your support, so go to CorsiLegalDefenseFund.com, CorsiLegalDefenseFund.com. But most of all, I want you to disseminate this radio show and the article I'm going to embed when I send it out by email that I wrote today, because you need to know the truth. You, the American people, cannot be spectators. This is not a spectator sport. Get up off the couch. Put the snacks down. Put the beer down. Put the Diet Coke down. Join Freedom Watch. Time is short. We need to wage a second American revolution peacefully and legally, and we'll do it, and we will succeed. So God bless you. God bless your family. God bless America. And God save America. And we'll be back next week with another edition of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman.